He had everything money could buy: private jets, mansions, a name that opened every door. But none of that mattered the night he stepped into a small-town diner. In the corner, a young black waitress took his disabled son by the hand, guiding him onto the dance floor. It should have been a beautiful moment. Instead, it sparked whispers, stares, and something much darker. What happened next would shatter his beliefs, expose the prejudice he never saw coming, and change both of their lives forever. James Whitmore was a man who lived in a world of excess. Billionaire investor, father of one, his life was a blur of boardrooms, charity galas, and vacations in places most people only saw in magazines. To outsiders, he had it all: success, influence, security. But his world was carefully curated, far removed from the struggles and realities of everyday life. His son, Daniel, was the center of his universe. Born with a physical disability, Daniel's life had been a series of challenges, but James made sure he never wanted for anything. Money could buy the best doctors, the finest schools, even private dance instructors. Yet James had never truly noticed how sheltered they both were from the world beyond their gated estate. One autumn evening, on their way back from a charity event, a sudden craving for something simple: a burger, a milkshake, led them into a small roadside diner in a quiet southern town. The place was warm, the kind of spot where the walls told stories through faded photographs. But the moment they stepped inside, James felt eyes turn. He brushed it off as curiosity. He didn't know it yet, but that diner would become the stage for a moment so small, yet so powerful, it would force him to confront a truth he had spent his entire life avoiding. The diner smelled of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee, a cozy place that should have felt welcoming. James guided Daniel to a booth by the window while the waitress approached. She was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a name tag that read Tanya. Her smile was warm, her voice kind, genuine in a way James wasn't used to. As they waited for their order, James noticed Daniel's eyes following the faint rhythm of a song playing on the jukebox. Tanya noticed too. When she came back with their drinks, she leaned toward Daniel and said something that made him beam. Then, without hesitation, she offered her hand. In a moment that felt suspended in time, Daniel took it. Tanya gently helped him to his feet, guiding him toward the open space near the jukebox. She let him lead slow, careful steps, each one lighting up his face with joy, but then James felt it. The air shifted, conversations around the diner grew quieter. Forks paused midway to mouths. A couple in the corner stopped eating altogether, eyes locked not on the dance but on Tanya. A man at the counter muttered something under his breath. Another snorted in disgust. James couldn't make out every word, but the tone was unmistakable, sharp, bitter, laced with prejudice. His stomach tightened. Tanya seemed to hear it too, but her smile didn't fade. She kept her focus on Daniel, letting him spin her in a clumsy circle. The whispers grew louder, some tinged with mocking laughter, others with an edge that made James's skin prickle. "Shameless," one voice hissed. In front of everyone, another, more venomous, "doesn't know her place." James had been in countless tense negotiations, faced ruthless competitors, even stared down hostile takeovers, but this was different. This was personal, ugly in a way he had never felt before. For the first time, he saw the way strangers could strip someone's dignity with nothing more than a glance or a few poisoned words. Tanya's co-worker emerged from the kitchen, shooting her a look, a silent warning. Still, Tanya didn't let go of Daniel's hand. She guided him back to their booth, crouching to meet his eyes and telling him he'd done great. James wanted to say something, to thank her, but before he could, the man at the counter stood. His voice cut through the diner, slow and deliberate. "You people think you can just waltz in here and what? Make us clap for you?" The room seemed to shrink. James's pulse pounded in his ears. He had the wealth, the power, the status, but in that moment, none of it could shield Tanya from the weight of what was being thrown at her. And he knew if he stayed silent, he'd be part of it too. The diner went silent, except for the faint hum of the jukebox. Tanya stood frozen, her hand still resting lightly on the back of Daniel's wheelchair. The man at the counter took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on her with a look that dripped with contempt. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. "And you sure as hell don't touch one of ours." James felt heat rise in his chest. One of ours, he glanced at Daniel, whose face was caught between confusion and fear. The child didn't understand the full meaning of the words, but he understood the tension. He could feel it pressing in like walls closing around them. Another voice joined in from a booth near the door. "She's just doing it for the money. Bet she wouldn't give him the time of day if his daddy wasn't rich." Laughter followed, short, ugly, and hollow. Tanya straightened, her chin lifting ever so slightly. "I was dancing with him because he wanted to dance," she said. But her voice, steady as it was, didn't mask the way her hands trembled. The man stepped closer, close enough now that James could see the deep lines on his face, the clenched jaw. "You think you can come in here, make some kind of scene, and we're just gonna smile and watch? Not in my town." James's fists tightened beneath the table. He had stayed out of fights his entire life, always negotiated, smoothed things over, walked away. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was his son. This was Tanya. This was a moment that would mark them all. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. The room seemed to hold its breath. James's voice, when it came, was steady but charged. "Then maybe your town needs to change." The words landed like a spark in dry grass. And in the next heartbeat, the man made his move. The man's approach was cut short not by James, but by Tanya's quiet and wavering presence. She didn't step back. She didn't look away. And in that silence, the ugliness in the room became impossible to ignore. A few patrons shifted uncomfortably. One woman gathered her children and left. James placed himself between Tanya and the man, his voice calm but firm. "You've said enough." Something in his tone, not loud, not aggressive, but absolute, made the man hesitate. He muttered something under his breath and turned away, retreating to the counter. The moment passed, but the weight of it didn't. Tanya thanked James with a small nod before returning to her work as if nothing had happened, Daniel still holding the memory of that dance, smiled at her with the pure, unshaken joy only a child can have. On the drive home, James didn't speak much. He kept replaying the scene in his mind, the stares, the words, the casual cruelty. He realized that for Tanya, this wasn't a single incident. This was her life. The stares didn't end when the check was paid. The whispers didn't fade when she left work. She carried them every day in a way he never had to. For the first time, James understood that having wealth didn't mean having freedom, not if the color of your skin meant you were never seen as equal. And he knew that silence in moments like this was just another form of complicity. This was more than a dance. It was a mirror held up to a truth too many people choose not to see. So the question isn't whether racism still exists. The question is, how many of us are willing to stand up when we see it?